Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. In today's episode, we're going to discuss 7 must-have books for any Espiritista, spiritual worker, spiritist, or anyone working through these traditions. First, I want to thank my subscriber for giving us this topic as far as what are the best spiritual books necessary for an Espiritista or needed by an Espiritista. That's first off. And before we get into that list, I want to go ahead and tell you too, if you like the video, click like, thumbs up, click subscribe if you like the channel and you want to keep up to date with me. Also on Apple Podcast, iTunes, Google Podcast, and Anchor.fm, you can subscribe to my spiritual podcast where we discuss a whole bunch of more spiritual topics. Lastly, at hectorsalva.com, you can go to my blog, read a whole bunch of articles on all types of spiritual things, grow spiritually, as well as subscribe to my newsletter. So now let's get into the list. 7 spiritual books, 7 must-have spiritual books that you should have doing Espiritismo as an Espiritista, so on and so forth. So the first one is the Bible. Our traditions have Christian Catholic backgrounds, and the Bible is often seen as a magical book and has many recipes and verses that we use in our spiritual work, both during spiritual work, healings, and magic. So the Bible is one of those essential spiritual books that most Espiritistas have and that are going to be a go-to that you want to have. The second spiritual book, I would say, is The Gospel According to Spiritism by Allan Kardec. So The Gospel According to Spiritism is a very important book because it's the interpretation of the Gospels of the Bible according to Spiritism, Spiritist beliefs, as well as according to the Spirit from its conversations with Allan Kardec. So much of this book discusses karma, suffering, various life things that you may come upon, issues, and talks about the way that spiritists approach life, humanity, living, and many common life issues. So the Gospel According to Spiritism is one of those essential books that you're going to want to have to refer back to, and you're going to want to read it. The third book is Collection of Selected Prayers by Allan Kardec. This book is both available in English and in Spanish. It features the image of a bust of Jesus, the head of Jesus, with a crown of thorns. This book is often used, again, it has a lot of good information to read, but the prayers in it are used during reunions, misas, and other rituals. It's a very foundational book. So you're going to want to be able to have it and read it so that you can really absorb its contents and the knowledge that's within it. So that's 1, 2, and 3. So that leads us to number 4. Book number 4, if you can read Spanish, is La Fe en la Oración. This is one of the oldest books, and I believe it actually comes from like the 1930s. And growing up, it's the book that I use, but growing up, it's the book that I always seen used by all the Espiritistas. Some of the books I'm going to suggest to you weren't available back then, and it contains old prayers and some techniques and recipes according to those old traditional prayers that at one time were sold on the islands as individual like leaves, meaning individual papers with the prayers printed on them or written on them. So if you can read Spanish, La Fe en la Oración is a very foundational and common Spiritist book. Before I go move a little further, I want to actually move back and say, with Espiritismo and Espiritismo Cruzado, Sanse, and these practices, although we have Spiritism and we have a Spiritism basis from Allan Kardec, we don't agree or subscribe to everything. There is a branch of Espiritismo that is known as Kardashian or Kardecist, where people follow exactly the teachings of Allan Kardec, and they are known as Kardec Spiritists. Our Spiritism, Espiritismo Folklórico, Espiritismo Cruzado, Espiritismo de Pueblo, has absorbs some, though not all, of those beliefs. So there are some things that don't apply when it comes into Espiritismo according to what Allan Kardec teaches. Our tradition is a little bit different. So now moving forward. So the last fourth book, if you do read Spanish, you're going to want La Fe en la Oración. It's what I grew up with. Every Espiritista used it. All the Espiritistas used it. It's very common. It has the prayers. Now, books 6 and 7, 5 and 6, actually. Books 5 and 6 are Helping Yourself with Selected Prayers, Volume 1 and Volume 2. At one time, these books didn't really exist, but they're in English, and many within them, they have many of the prayers that you will find in La Fe de la Oración, and some of the prayers that you find in the collection of Allan Kardec's selected prayers. You'll find some of each of those prayers within Helping Yourself with Selected Prayers, Volume 1 and Volume 2. I believe they're provided by Original Publications. You're going to want them both. Some of them do have the same prayer in both books, but some of them, Volume 1 has some prayers that Volume 2 doesn't have. Volume 2 has prayers that Volume 1 doesn't have. Volume 1 has a pink cover with some saints. Volume 2, blue with some saints. So if you read English, you're really going to want Helping Yourself with Selected Prayers, Volume 1 and Volume 2. And lastly, book number 7. This is more so up to you, but I find it's very convenient. The Psalms are commonly used in our traditions and are used magically. So there are many different magical books about the Psalms, but the book actually contains the whole just book of Psalms, which makes it really easy to reference and work with when you're doing magical work and you don't want to basically get stuff on your Bible, like dirty hands and such. So there are many books that are just basically Psalm magic books that contain all of the printed Psalms within them. They have little recipes and things like that, and we may or may not use those at times, but basically what's important is that you have all the Psalms there in one little book, really nice and convenient for you to copy or do whatever you need to do. I personally use Anna Riva's Power of the Psalms, has all the Psalms in it, and has whatever it is that she does. I don't really pay that no mind. Most Espiritistas don't, but the Psalms being there and convenient is really what we're after. So those are the 7 spiritual books that you're going to want as a spiritist to have as a foundation. Now, aside from that, you're going to want to have you can have other religious books, other holy books, and other religious texts. Espiritista believe that knowledge is spread everywhere. So if you're really a reader, knowing and reading other religious texts and holy books are another thing that you're probably going to want to go ahead and do. And lastly, let me just double check my list here for you. You're going to want other Spiritism books. So again, we are different than the Kardecists. We practice differently than the Kardec people, but we do have many similarities, and much of that comes into play. So not all mediums and Espiritistas have read Allan Kardec's other books, and it's not absolutely necessary, but it will give you a huge understanding of the spiritual world and spiritual things. And those are known as the Medium's Book and the Spirit's Book. So, to conclude, I'm going to say that some of those books of Allan Kardec I do have at ezilikonin.com, where you can go ahead and check those books out as far as like free PDF downloads. So you may want to do that. And outside of that, these books are usually really easy to attain. They generally these days can be found even on Amazon or basically any botanica. Most botanicas carry these foundational books that you're going to want to have. So I hope you're doing well. Many, many blessings. Keep the faith, and don't forget to click like and go ahead and click subscribe. Many blessings.